Good afternoon, everyone here and remotely. Thank you so much for being here. I'm really delighted this afternoon to take you on a journey into our inaugural Judaica Gallery, Intentional Beauty, which celebrates treasures from the MFA's Jewish Ritual Art collection, largely with new acquisitions. I hope you enjoy slides because you'll see I have lots of them. That's why I have to keep track with a text. And so here is a view of the entrance of the new, beautiful, unbiased gallery when you come in. And with this gallery, we really wanted to shed light on diverse yet overlooked objects and stories, such as new acquisitions on the left, Yemenite headdresses for women, but also on the right, you will find works that had been with us for almost 100 years, and they are on display for the first time. This is not only a very meaningful project for me, it really is a milestone for the MFA. By giving its own stage to Judaica, its own gallery, the MFA, I think it's showing real commitment to Jewish artistic heritage. And I want to thank and express gratitude to the David Berg Foundation and other private donors that have made the gallery possible. The gallery is not just the first Judaica gallery in an encyclopedic museum here. It is also the first time in Boston, in New England, in the Northeast, so it's very significant. That I know of, there are 5 such museum spaces in encyclopedic museums, encyclopedic art museums in the world. And we couldn't have opened at a better time. Maybe some of you were here that 8th December, just last 8th December, in conjunction with the annual MFA community celebration. It was very exciting, just a few hours after putting the final touches to the gallery, to see streams of visitors from all ages, patiently waiting in lines from the ground floor, and I've even spotted newborns. And I felt bad for them, waiting in line to get into the gallery. And it was just really the perfect timing. And I think that its location here is fantastic. It's very central, really close by to what really is the epicenter of the museum, that is the Shapiro courtyard. So, before zooming in the objects and the stories of the gallery, I want to address a question that I'm often asked. Did the MFA show Judaica before? The answer is, if you come to the MFA often enough, very much so. We've been, for years, integrating Jewish works according to the period and the region of their production. We are now in about 14 galleries, and I'll just show you a few examples. From top left, Art of the Islamic Cultures, 17th and 18th century in Scotland and England in the Hamilton Palace, the new wonderful Dutch gallery, 17th century Netherlands, contemporary art in the Daphne Farago Studio Craft Gallery, Newport, Rhode Island in the 18th century, also Art of the Americas, 20th century, the theme of war and spirituality, Europe, 18th century decorative arts, and also two that we had to take down, but in the lower rotunda and the corridor for 19th century European paintings. As shown in our freshly printed leaflet that you can get both at the Sharf desk and also just with the QR code in our gallery, you can obtain the digital form, we have no intention of stopping integrating works throughout the museum. The fact that we've opened a dedicated gallery doesn't mean that we will stop to do that, because we believe that Jewish identity is both things at once, meaning part of wider cultures, but also retaining a core individual heritage. So why have we decided to do a gallery? This is another question that I'm often asked. More than a desire, it was really a need, almost an urge as far as I'm concerned, because in the past 6 years, we've been very rapidly growing our collection with an intensive acquisition campaign with 47 new acquisitions and counting, and we wanted to share the new acquisitions with you, with the visitors. And so that's the first thing. Secondly, we wanted a home for education and outreach for our youngest visitors and for school groups, and we're really hoping that the Judaica Gallery will become a hub of education for school groups. And also it was important to think about the meaning and the function of Jewish objects and explore them alongside other Jewish objects, and that's what we're doing in the gallery. Why the title, Intentional Beauty? Because the splendor of these objects is functional, their beauty is deliberate, their artistry is purposeful, according to the rabbinic principle of hidur mitzvah, that is usually translated as enhancement or beautification of the commandment. Aesthetics are essential to religious life, because not only do they glorify God, which is the intention, but also they enrich our religious experience. They deepen the immersion in the ritual act by appealing to the senses. I almost feel that today we would use words like mindfulness and being present in the moment. So quality of forms and richness of textures really, I think, helps us to be mindful and present in the moment in a way. And the core principle of hidur mitzvah, of functional splendor or beauty, is what ties together an incredibly diverse group of objects that include furniture, silver, textiles, paintings, works on paper, from the late 1500s up to today. And perhaps most importantly is the geographic diversity, because we're talking about works that go from India, Iraq, Iran, Yemen, Israel, part of North Africa, many countries in Europe, and of course the United States. And these objects, you will see, could not be any more different between them, and that's because Jewish law does not prescribe or dictate a specific form of style of ceremonial objects, aside for very strict rules about the actual Torah scroll, and we'll see in a moment. So that led to great variety and freedom of different artistic medium according to the region and time when the objects have been produced. How to give sense to such an incredibly diverse group of objects? As I worked on the project, 3 themes started to emerge. From the left, those objects that are made for use in the synagogue and then called, as a title, Dressing the Torah, mainly historic, you will see in the gallery. In the center, objects made to be used in the home, which we call Judaica Revolution, because here you will find mostly contemporary works. And finally, dressing the body, meaning ritual garments and wearable items that we wear on the body. I was so fortunate to work with our brilliant head of design, Keith Crippen, who really gave sense to these different themes and these very varied objects and stories. And I'm just showing, because I love them, the renderings that design creates for us quite at an early stage, right? And here is the section on the home. It's important to say that as I worked on the concept, themes, and design, we also met with a very diverse cohort of Jewish and non-Jewish community leaders, educators, rabbis, to share our thinking. And the Table of Voices cohort offered very valuable input, and they were an integral part of the process. And Lori Lefkowitz is here today. Thank you, Lori. So let's enter the gallery. Here is a view from the entrance, which mostly captures objects from the Dressing the Torah theme, right, for the synagogue. Many of you, I assume, today will know that Torah, Hebrew for teaching, contains the first 5 books of the Bible, the Pentateuch. It is foundational, central text to Judaism, as the commandments in the Torah really shape, or should shape, a Jewish life. And for this reason, the Torah scroll, with the text handwritten on parchment by a scribe, is the most treasured object in Judaism. It is dressed in beautiful fabrics and mantles and adorned with splendid Torah silver ornaments like crowns and Torah finials that we will see. During the synagogue services, the scroll is brought out from the Torah ark and the text is chanted aloud. To illustrate the dressing and undressing of the Torah, as she's taken out from the ark, we have obtained a video filmed at the Great Synagogue in Rome, which is where I'm from, that really shows their magnificent Judaica in action. So make sure when you're in the gallery to find the video, because you will see Roman silver Judaica from the 17th and 18th century just being used in the Synagogue of Rome. We have reproduced in one of our text panels for Dressing the Torah this fabulous painting that is in the collection of the Jewish Museum that really depicts a scene in the synagogue of Livorno, the day of Simchat Torah, of the rejoicing for the Torah, the annual festival that really marks the end of one reading of the Torah cycle, one reading cycle, the beginning of a new one. And there is this sense of drama and excitement, partly to do with the beautiful textiles and silver that decorate the various Torah scrolls. Now, there is no other way to start our in-depth tour in the Judaica Gallery than with our most important piece in the collection, and I would even say one of the most important pieces in the entire European silver collection. It is a Torah shield made to be hung by a chain, as you can see, on the front of the Torah scroll, like a necklace. It was made in 1782 in Lvov, then Galicia, part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, now Lviv in in Ukraine. You see, I wasn't the only one to think that this is a very special piece, because a few weeks before the Sotheby's auction, the Wall Street Journal, not exactly an art academic journal, featured the Torah shield as the poster image and the highlight of the entire sale at Sotheby's. And that is the reason why I was willing, on a very snowy December day 2020, pre-vaccine, height of pandemic time, after 10 long months of strict isolation, to get on a cab for a day trip to New York, to go to Sotheby's and to see in person this exceptional piece. And when I held it first in my hands, I felt like I was holding an 8-inch high piece of jewelry. Just look at the wealth of materials, the gilded silver, the enamel, the niello technique, the semi-precious stones, the engraved side, and the dense decoration on both sides, which is what makes this piece unique, because Torah shields are only meant to be seen and therefore decorated on the front, whereas here we see that they're fully and lavishly decorated on both sides. And starting from the front, the artists kept the traditional iconography of Torah shields that usually are the central tablets of the law, above it a crown that always represents the Torah, on the side Moses and his brother Aaron. However, what is truly original is the backdrop, is this gilded silver screen of animals and plants and foliage forming almost this circular dance. That's why I cropped the image, so that you can see that all these branches and these leaves actually end up, and this is the best thing, my favorite thing, with heads of various fantastical animals. Sea creatures, sea serpents, reptiles, lizards with human heads, dragons, and all sorts of other fantastical animals. He also had animals on roundels, you see, here, all around, and beginning in the top center, a bear, a goat, a bull, a deer, a leopard, and an elephant. To allow visitors to really appreciate the level of details of this work that is so small, that you cannot see even if you're holding in your hand, we knew we wanted to create the one interactive device in the gallery. And so you can really zoom into the highest resolution. And as you can see, children from the very first opening night love the interactive, that they can zoom in and see the details. Now, where does this rich repertoire come from? As it's been pointed out by Sharon Lieberman-Mintz in the Sotheby's catalog, the artists must have been inspired by the monumental wooden Torah arcs in Galician synagogues, and sadly, they're almost all gone, destroyed. And here is a synagogue, a photo of an ark that no longer exists, but that you see. You can immediately understand where these almost, this incredibly tight and dense net of animals and plants came from, including the animals on the roundels. It came directly from the synagogues, the Torah arcs that the artist would have seen in the region where he grew up. Now, the back, which remember is usually not decorated, is superbly engraved to an incredibly detailed level of precision that you really don't typically see with silver, but rather with copper engraving meant for books, right? And so it's engraved, you can probably recognize, with scenes from the life of Isaac. Starting from the top, the sacrifice of Isaac. In the center, you have Isaac blessing his son Jacob, and down below you have a roundel with a Levite, right, a member of the house of Levi, washing the hands of the high priest of the temple. I'll just draw your attention for a second to a detail here in the central scene that I don't know if you can actually see it, but Rebecca, Jacob's mother is gently pushing Jacob to trick his old and blind father, Isaac, to get his last blessing, right? And if you remember from the biblical story, Jacob pretends to be his older, hairier brother, and therefore you can see that the silversmith has even taken the trouble to put the fur, the animal fur, on the arms of Jacob. And in the distance, you see that Esav, the firstborn, is obliviously hunting in in the forest. So you just see the level of detail that the silversmith has gone to illustrate something that is not meant to be seen because it's on the back. Now, before I go to the next slide, we don't know who commissioned this work, but it has been interestingly suggested that because all of the scenes on the screen, on the shield, represent stories of Isaac, and because we see a Levite here, maybe the patron's name was Isaac Levy. This is something that we have to look into, so there's more work to be done. And below the scenes of Isaac, there is perhaps the most important reason for the celebrity status of this shield, which is this Hebrew engraved inscription, where the artist tells us his name, Elimelech Tzoref, and Tzoref means goldsmith in Hebrew, comes from Stanislav, which is about 2 hours drive now from Lviv now, and he made it with my own hands in the year, well, this is in Gregorian calendar, 1781, 1782. Why is this so important? A, because silversmiths did not sign their work like painters, like Monet or Van Gogh. They didn't. They punched with their maker marks their initials. And he has decided to actually sign in full his name. Secondly, because at this time in most of Europe, Jews were not allowed to be artists. They were not allowed into the artists and silversmiths professional guilds. But in this pocket of Europe, in Galicia, we clearly see that Elimelech was allowed to do that at a very high level too. Another reason for the prestige of this acquisition is that the object belonged for at least 130 years to the celebrated Sassoon family, right? The Iraqi Jewish family that came from Baghdad but moved to India in the 19th century, and then they proceeded to create a global empire starting from Hong Kong through Bombay all the way to Manchester in England. And the Jewish Museum recently put together a wonderful exhibition about the Sassoons as art collectors. And here is the original owner of our Torah shield, Reuben Sassoon, who was born in Bombay, in his Indian attire. And on the left, you can see the private Sassoon Torah ark, where we can just get a glimpse of our shield in the back. Now, as we knew that this is our most important piece, so we wanted to greet the visitor immediately, right, as you enter the gallery. Here it is. And then I started to visualize, and thanks to Keith Crippen, this became reality, different pairs of Torah finials almost orbiting the Torah shield. And this is what you will find here, right? 4 different pairs of Torah finials. What are Torah finials? Torah finials are Torah silver ornaments, usually silver, that decorate the top of the Torah scroll. They're essentially slotted onto the wooden rods of the scroll. They have almost always bells, because as the Torah scroll and the ornaments are moved around the synagogue hall for the reading of the Torah, the tinkling bells call the attention of the congregants. And first of all, this is a very helpful 18th century engraving by the French engraver Bernard Picard. It's often used because it shows to those who haven't encountered Torah finials how they slot onto the Torah scroll. A beautiful detail from the picture we've already seen. And I've just mentioned to you the bells, right? Now, the bells also have a biblical origin, because they're in the very detailed description in the Bible of the dress of the high priest of the tabernacle. we find that the hem has an alternation of bells and pomegranates. And I love that Elimelech Tzoref has taken the trouble to represent that in tiny, tiny size on the dress of Aaron, who was, of course, the first high priest. And so this also brings us to the Hebrew name for Torah finials, rimonim, which in Hebrew means pomegranate, and here they are. And so, Torah finials. In 2018, we purchased the first pair from Morocco that you can find in the gallery. Then we got a little carried away. We've purchased another 5 pairs since then. 2 are in the Dutch and English galleries, but you can find 4 pairs in the Judaica gallery. And as I mentioned or alluded to earlier, one of the main messages that I wanted to convey in this gallery is the extraordinary diversity of Jewish visual culture. And Torah finials are perhaps the object type that is the best candidate to do that, because they're really used across the Jewish world. I must start with my favorites. The Torah finials, a very, very important pair, 17th century, and Judaica, 17th century Judaica is incredibly rare, not because it didn't exist, but because it was melted down, it was looted, and you know, through persecutions, and most importantly through the Holocaust, we've lost most of our Judaica, especially in silver. So this pair that was made by Jürgen Richels, who was a Christian German silversmith, known to be very prolific with fabulous works, both domestic and liturgical, in the leading art museums in the world, the Victoria and Albert Museum in London and the Met, and he also made Judaica. And he created Judaica because this was the norm for Christian artists to create Judaica, because of what I said a moment ago, because Jews in Western Europe were not allowed to do that. They were not allowed in the silversmiths guilds. So we know 2 pairs of Torah finials by Jürgen Richels, and what he did here, and by the way, when we purchased this and I brought this to the trustees, the main reason, amongst other reasons, was that these were then the earliest Torah finials in the US. I then had to say the same thing for a second pair of Torah finials that is older. So that means that we now have the 2 oldest pairs of Torah finials in the US. So why do I love this pair so much? It is based on a model of Torah finials that came from the Netherlands that was shaped like a tower on 3 tiers, hexagonal, successively smaller, and you'll find them in the Dutch corridor. However, Jürgen Richels, in good Baroque German silver style that was so exuberant and over the top, which we love, he really made these finials very sculptural and voluptuous, and he made them very dynamic with a series of decorations and throughout, like trefoils and quatrefoils and so on. And this detail shows you this opening where you can see the bell, where the silver is so fluid, it almost seems to drip like liquid silver. And this is the skill of Jürgen Richels. By the way, the Antique and Fine Art magazine deemed our Richels Torah finials to be acquisition of the year in 2019. So I've just said about the fact that the norm was for Christian silversmiths in Western Europe to be the Judaica makers. And this is the reason, one of the reasons why we decided to do something which is very unusual for us, which is to go for a joint acquisition. And so with the Jewish Museum in New York, this past summer, we acquired this important pair of Torah finials by a Jewish silversmith, Abraham Lopez de Oliveira. Abraham Lopez de Oliveira is a bit of a celebrity in the Judaica world, well, because he's Jewish to start with. He was born in Amsterdam, and he grew up in the Spanish and Portuguese community in Amsterdam. He then, in the late 17th century, moves to London and the same, right, the same milieu, the same community. And we're not exactly sure how he gradually becomes the maker of Judaica for the London communities. He's known to have made more than 10 pairs of Torah finials and other kinds of Judaica. One second. Yes, and I want to remind you something that is interesting about London. He arrives in London in 1697. We have to remember that Jews had been readmitted to the country only 40 years before. The Jews were expelled from England in 1290, and until 1656, there were no communities. So we're talking about an artist that arrives 40 years after a Jewish community is revived and accepted in the country, and already there is a request for Jewish ceremonial items. And so these are the important acquisitions we made together with the Jewish Museum in New York. They're also based on the 3 levels, like Richel's, but they're very, very different. You see very extravagant, very light, with pierced open work, extensive use of shells that are the trademark of Rococo style, and the engraved, beautiful engraved staves or handles, right? Handles of the Torah finials. And this is characteristic of Oliveira. What is also excellent is that we can clearly see all the maker's marks on the central part, which is something that we always aspire to. We want Judaica with the maker's marks. We now move on to the most diminutive pair that you will find in the gallery, this lovely Moroccan pair that was probably made in the cities of Fez or Meknès, and thanks to another almost identical pair in the Israel Museum in Jerusalem, we know that they were made by Jewish craftsmen. We even have names. So the situation in Islamic region was very different from Europe. And in fact, we will see that in Morocco and Yemen and other Islamic countries, the traditional occupation for Jews was silversmiths, goldsmiths, jewelers, metalsmiths in general. And they beautifully show the style of Islamic architecture, both in pre-expulsion Spain, right? And you see here El Tránsito Synagogue, which you can today go and visit in Toledo. It was a church for a time, then became a museum. Look at how close visually these two works are. The dense decoration, the bright colors, the horseshoe arches of these lovely Torah finials. And I'm glad we were also able to show a pair that we acquired this past summer through a donation that really speak to the Hebrew name of the Torah finials, the rimon, the pomegranate. Finally, we have the fruit-like shape that probably all Torah finials originally were, but at some point in Europe they were replaced by the tower form, maybe looking at local architecture or looking at European Christian reliquaries. That happened in Europe, in the region of the Ottoman Empire, in the Middle East, even in Central Asia. This is the Torah finial that stayed, right, with the with the round shape. This floral design is very common to Iranian Torah finials, and what is also very common is the inscription that you find here, right, that I have reproduced on the slide. I love spontaneous connections between objects that you don't see coming, because when you walk through the galleries and you've taken a journey through Germany and England and Iran and Morocco, right here, you've started in Galicia, which is Western Ukraine, Eastern Poland of today, but you actually find yourself facing a work made by a wood carver born in the same region, born in Galicia, Sam Katz, who, like many, and I should say, these are major acquisition. It was originally in the synagogue of Sharet Zion, also known as Orange Street Shul Synagogue in Chelsea. Boston Globe thought that this acquisition was so unusual and unexpected and interesting, especially for the local connection to Chelsea, that they put us in this interesting article about unusual and interesting acquisitions. And so first, let's look at the Torah ark that really represents the traditional iconography of American Torah arks that derived from Eastern European Torah arks. It was made in the 1920s, we're not sure when, probably early 1920s, by Sam Katz, and I'll tell you about him in a moment. And you see that it shows from the top the Torah crown, the crown that represents the Torah, the tablets of the law with the rampant lions that are holding the tablets of the law. They are said from the Jewish tradition to represent the tribe of Judah, but we know that we see them on, the Old Bailey in London, in the royal crest. So it's also a European visual device. Then, of course, we see the Stars of David and the very popular hands in pop culture, the hands of the high priest in a blessing gesture, but most of visitors come to me and want to talk about Star Trek, which I've never watched, but I now know that that's what happens in Star Trek. What's lovely is that character in Star Trek was played by Leonard Nimoy, who's from Boston, sons of immigrant himself, grew up in the West End. Those hands that he uses in that TV series were most certainly his idea. So where am I? Okay, so Sam Katz. Sam Katz, the artist, the wood carver of the Chelsea Torah ark, was born in Vishnevets, which was a small village in Galicia, in the same region. And like other Eastern European immigrants to this country, he really established himself here as a maker of Torah arks. And in fact, after a short period in upstate New York, he came to Chelsea, where he became the leading Torah ark maker almost in all of Massachusetts, I would say. He's known to have made at least 20 Torah arks, of which another 5 that I know of survive in the area. Some of these are now the backdrop for churches, like this one, the Iglesia de Dios in Chestnut Street in Chelsea. It's still there, but the tablets of the law in Hebrew have been removed. There is a similar one in Woodrow Avenue in Dorchester. But thankfully, we still have Torah arks by Sam Katz that are still used as Torah arks. For example, in the beautiful large Walnut Street Shul Synagogue in Chelsea and the Adam Street Synagogue in Newton. even before the exciting 2023 Torah Ark acquisition, we knew Sam Katz well, because since 1960, the MFA has had in its collection this roaring gilded lion, which you will see also in the gallery. It was bought and donated to the MFA by collector Maxim Karolik, not for its Jewishness, but as an example of American folk art. However, as you can see on the left, it originally stood, along with its companion, on top of the Torah Ark in the now defunct Anshe Poland synagogue in the south end. Who knows where the companion is, where the rest of the Torah Ark is? That it was probably taken apart and maybe sold through various dealers. We really don't know, but there are so many stories like this for Torah Arks and synagogue furniture. So how 63 years after the Gilded Lion by Sam Katz entered our collection did we get to acquire a Torah Ark by Sam Katz? The Ark came to us in the form of an email I received from Rabbi David Wyman in early 2020, just weeks before the lockdown. Rabbi Wyman told us he was a Judaica collector, and he asked us if we were interested in the Torah Ark by Sam Katz from Chelsea, Orange Street Shul. And I read the email and jumped up and down. Literally, I think I jumped up and down my seat. And I said, of course we want it. I didn't know that it would be a bit of a long way because of the pandemic. It took me only, it took me, no, this is not what I wanted to show you. It took me 2 years to go see it in Syosset, Long Island, because David Wyman had been posted for 25 years in different parts of the US. So he had taken the Torah Ark with him to Texas for I don't know how long, and then to Long Island. And so he said, come to see it in Long Island. And we went to see it with Christine Storti, the head of furniture design, who's been a key role of this acquisition. And you see, it was standing in a corridor, and some of the parts were actually in storage, inside boxes, and we went and took photographs. And as Rabbi Wyman told me the story of how he obtained this ark, it was even more fascinating and more exciting, because he explains that in 1999, when he was a rabbi in Newton, he heard that the Orange Street Shul was closing. They didn't know what to do with the ark. They had to pay to throw it away. And so with 2 helpers from his Newton congregation, he went to remove it from the wall. And he sent me a VHS tape, and when I watched it, I realized that the handyman on the ladder was actually the rabbi. Installing, disassembling the thing. And so this footage, of course, had to become part of a documentary that we made called Rescuing the Orange Street Shul Ark, a story of Jewish Chelsea. And you can find it online, and you can find it in the gallery. He even sent me in a separate envelope the Eternal Light, the Ner Tamid, the original one, a few decades old, which is still working, but we keep it in conservation. We've created a replica for the gallery. So after we went to see it in Syosset, then we brought it here. You see that it was too high for our conservation studio, and Christine Storti proceeded for months to guide the conservation process through also external experts in gilding and wood strengthening. And so it took many months of serious conservation treatment until we were able to install it in this a rather complex installation that took many members of staff, and it now, I think, really is almost almost like a focal point of the gallery. And we're so happy that we persisted in what seemed like a complex operation. Now, inside the Torah Ark from Chelsea, we would have had Torah scrolls covered in fabrics. Like the beautiful mantle that you'll see in the gallery, Torah mantle from Austria, with this deep velvet, deep burgundy, with gilded embroidery, with the Torah crown, the crown representing the Torah, and the initials for Keter Torah, crown of the Torah, the gilded inscription that tells us who donated and when this Torah mantle to the synagogue, and this is very much typical. The embroidered inscriptions on Jewish textiles are meant to commemorate the donors, and we find it also on a recent rediscovery of a treasury from storage that is actually the oldest item in the gallery. It dates to the late 1500, and it is an Italian Torah binder, a long linen strip made to tie the Torah scroll when not in use. But it actually came in the collection in 1895 as just a piece of Italian lace. So it was not a Judaica gift at the time, and it was incredibly exciting to rediscover it in storage. You see that, again, the inscription tells us who the donors were, and although they don't date it, which is unusual, we find almost identical ones in Italy that are dated 1590. So we know that is the period. In the gallery next to the textiles, you see here a very different cylindrical, solid object that is a very different Jewish tradition, that of the Iraqi tik, the large wooden Torah case in which the Torah scroll is both housed and read, therefore standing upright rather than being taken out and laid flat on the reader's desk. And the solid tik, as opposed to the mantle, is used throughout, not only in Iraq, but throughout the Middle East, and some countries in North Africa, some of Central Asia, in India. Our Torah Ark, which we acquired this past summer, is a very fine example of the Baghdad Torah case, the Baghdad tik, that consists of the wooden shell being embossed in this very, very dense silver decoration, you see, with flowers in a net kind of design, with flowers within leafy frames. When the Ark arrived this past summer, this design was not that visible because it was very badly tarnished. And Katrina Posner in conservation spent 100 hours, they were counted, very patiently removing the tarnish. And now the almost three-dimensionality of the design really is very, very well visible. And the tik is made even more beautiful by the moving inscription that we find in the panels inside. You see? The tik and the Torah scroll were donated by the famous Aaron Shalom Gabbai for the exaltation and rest of the soul of the unfortunate young man, Sasson, his son, who passed away in 1879. Who was the grieving, famous Aaron Gabbai? So I had to answer this question to establish the provenance as well, so the history of ownership, which is a must for a Judaica acquisition. So I started to look into Aaron Gabbai and realized that he was a member of one of the most eminent Iraqi families, Baghdadi families, actually living in India, in Calcutta, which made this piece even more appealing. We now have an object that it represents the artistic heritage of Iraqi Jewry, has an inscription of a father grieving about his son, but is a global object that shows the migrations of Jewish cultures because it was used in the synagogue of Bethel in Calcutta. So far we have looked at Judaica made for the synagogue, but we know that Jewish education really starts in the home, and that's why we've filled a wall with Judaica, domestic Judaica, called a Judaica Revolution because it consists mainly of contemporary pieces. And it's very important to appreciate because we want to give the message that Judaica is not just something of the past. It is well, it is alive, it is being transformed, it is being revived by artists today, by modern artists, both men and women, Jewish and non-Jewish, observant and secular, it doesn't matter, it's an art form. And so some of these artists offer highly individual takes of existing object types. Others propose recently newly invented objects, like the Miriam's cup here that we will look in a moment. But almost all of them opt for geometric forms and smooth surfaces. Like the father of modern or modernist Judaica, Ludwig Walbert, a German designer born in Germany, Bauhaus movement, moves to Jerusalem, and then comes to New York where he runs the Judaica workshop of the Jewish Museum for 25 years until his death. And in this time, he really revolutionized the traditional Jewish ceremonial art. Look at this, everything is in the gallery, this striking Shabbat candlestick, so used for the blessing on Friday night, for lighting the candles on Friday night. They rise high like New York skyscrapers. And that's the time, right, of modernism in New York in the 60s. The inscriptions, which in traditional Judaica typically were engraved, become the design element. They shape the object. And during my interview in person, I was taken around the galleries, and they said, yes, what does that say? Now, the Hebrew letters you will find, for those of you who read Hebrew, are so elongated and stretched out that it's not exactly immediately easy with 20 people around you to read what that says. But it does say, Shusha shish be'Adonai tagel nafshi be'Elohai. So it's a verse from Isaiah. I will rejoice with my Lord. My soul will rejoice with my God. So Ludwig Walbert, if you go to the Jewish Museum, they have the largest collection of his work. His student in the 50s in Jerusalem was Moshe Tzabari, who's now almost 90, and is the foremost living master of Judaica. And when I went to visit him in Jerusalem, in his home, asking for a work to acquire an example of his work that we did not have, he proposed this cup, this Kiddush cup, Kiddush, sanctification, made for the wine blessing of Friday night. And he told me, look, I've made this in the 90s, but I was never quite ready to part from it because it's the only one that I made. He showed me underneath, it says one of one, because it was technically the most challenging work I've ever made in my 6-year career. And I can understand why. The object is totally asymmetrical, very bold, almost wonky. Each side you look at it, it takes on a different shape. And each side is engraved with a symbol, with a Jewish symbol for a holiday where you do the Kiddush. And so here you can see, you will see another side in the gallery. But here you can see the shofar, the ram's horn for the high holidays, and the matzah, the leavened bread for Passover. And so we were really delighted to add this to the collection and to show it together with his teacher, with Walpert. Actually, most of the Judaica Revolution section consists of works made by women. For example, in the center, we have the Garden of Lights by Hanukkah lamp by Linda Threadgill. It was a gift that she gave to us a few years ago. She's based in Santa Fe. She has taught metalsmithing for generations, and she's always been inspired and interested in nature and botany, and so she's done the same with this Hanukkah lamp. She's basically created the candle holders as very thin stems that are being climbed by carefully etched petals and leaves. And on the sides, two other works by women, they are individual renditions of the spice container for the Havdalah ritual, for the end of the Shabbat on Friday evening that marks the end of the Shabbat and the beginning of the new week. Spice container because the smelling of the spices is meant to help us accept the end of the Shabbat and the beginning of the working week. And we find two very different works, both really original and you see very geometrical and smooth. The Korean-born Chung-Gi Chu has always been interested in trying to achieve the fluidity of organic forms. And she does this, and she etches the Hebrew letters for psamim, for spices. Deborah Krupenia, who's local and teaches in Waltham, creates these tiny, intimate, almost outer space quality spice containers with the tiny perforations that are meant to filter the smell of the spices. And she's always doing very, very small and highly refined pieces. In the gallery, I had for the first time the opportunity to juxtapose a traditional Judaica object with a contemporary one. And so I'm referring to the Elijah's cup on the right with its feminist twist, the Cynthia-eyed Miriam's cup. And we will hear a lot more about feminism and feminist ritual and gender next week with Lori Lefkowitz, so make sure to register for that. So the object on the right is very special to me. It is an Elijah's cup. In the Passover tradition, basically the fifth cup of wine is left for the prophet Elijah, who's meant to arrive unannounced to announce the arrival of the Messiah. And so this work, which was also a recent acquisition, was made in Italy, in the region of Piemonte, where Turin is, but actually in the city of Alessandria in 1830. And it is very important for us to acquire it, not just because it is beautiful, and looked at the incredibly extensive decoration with floral designs that are typical of Piemontese Kiddush goblets of this period. What is more unusual are the Jewish symbols on the foot. You usually don't see Jewish symbols on the foot on Piemontese Elijah's cups. Here, for example, you see the hands that we've seen earlier, the blessing hands of the high priest. What is so important and dear to me is that it was made, again, by a Jewish artist. I keep saying that Christians made Judaica and Europe, but then we keep finding these incredible exceptions and buying them, but it is still true that this is an exception. So Israel Vitale, for many decades, was able to practice the profession of silversmith because the kingdom of Savoy and Sardinia, there was no Italy yet, gave a special dispensation to Jews to enter their maker's mark and to practice the profession in those years, in the late 18th century, beginning of the 19th century. And so it did. The sad paradox is that the cap left Italy in October 1939, exactly 1 year after Italy, fascist Italy, passed racial laws. So the Jew was allowed and given dispensation to make this in the 19th century. By 1939, the owners, the Piemontese Jewish owners, leave and arrived to the US. And this is how this survived. So let's look at the feminist rendition. It couldn't be any more different, right? From very dense floral ornamentation to very, very smooth surface, very slender, elegant shape. To me, it's a flower, maybe an orchid, but we have recorded Cynthia I, the artist, in an audio clip that you can listen in the MFA mobile app and in the gallery, so she'll tell you her thinking for this work. I have to go a bit more quickly. Of the 3 paintings that we've included in the gallery, we have this quirky work by Malka Zeldis, who's now in her 90s. And as we were talking of the Elijah's cup ritual, we see it here in action. So we see that the door is open, there is still an empty seat, a cup that looks larger than the others, so it was probably for the prophet Elijah. We bought this work at a folk art auction. And folk art is also an area that the museum is very interested in at the moment. We have our first inaugural dedicated curator of folk art, and Jewish art often overlaps with folk art. So to have a work by a woman who looks into her childhood memories of celebrating Jewish festivals with her family and fills it with humorous, quirky details that I think will make it very, very popular with children. And we want this to be a teaching tool for school groups. But you really see things like the embroidered, here is the Judaica, the embroidered matzah cover for the leavened bread, the symbolic food. I understand for you American Jews that the Manischewitz wine is a classic. I don't know, I had to learn to say it. So this is the importance of self-taught art by a woman in a part of the collection, Judaica, that has been overlooked, was overlooked in the past. Okay, we come to the last section, dressing the body, that is really about wearable items, ritual garments. However, and this is to make a point, these are 2 gorgeous, compelling portraits by the portraitist Isidor Kaufmann, but only the one on the right is ours, Hannah. You'll see her in the gallery. The one on the left is at the Jewish Museum, but it's here because I want to make a point. And the point is that whereas for men, wearable garments are really about ritual and devotion and God and the commandments, and therefore he's wearing the kippah, the yarmulke, and he's wearing the talit, the prayer shawl. For women, it is, and I'm talking about Orthodox Judaism here, it is really, the head covering is really more about modesty and preventing the male gaze. So we're talking about 2 different things. Why am I? Oh, yes. And we do have a real, recently acquired talit. So again, the prayer shawl that follows the commandments of the tzitzit, the knotted, the biblical commandment, the knotted fringes at its corner. And we bought this recently, this talit that was made in 18th century Amsterdam. We're talking about that same Spanish and Portuguese community that Lopez de Oliveira came from. And this wouldn't have been your regular everyday talit. You see it from the embroidered corners with this brocade textile fabric that is used. This is another recent rediscovery, a treasury from storage. It is a talit katan, Hebrew for small talit, meant to be worn by men and boys under one's clothing. This clearly, with its silk fabric and its gold embroidery, is far too lavish to have been worn under the clothes. By the size, we believe it was made for a boy, for his bar mitzvah, the age 13, and it was meant to be worn in synagogue. Another interesting acquisition story, because it came in, you see, in 1938, not a new acquisition, on display for the first time. Philip Lehman of the Lehman Bank in New York, his wife had a textile collection. She dies in 1938. He donates this collection of hundreds of textiles to us, therefore not a Judaica gift, even though they were Jewish. And we now have the opportunity to put it on display first and put it on display in a Jewish context. Okay, we're almost there. I apologize we're a little late today. So this other juxtaposition that you'll see in the gallery, I love, and it speaks to what I was just mentioning now about the head covering for married women in the Orthodox Jewish world, which is an ancient custom, and it is common across the Jewish world. Why do I say it across the Jewish world? It goes from Eastern Europe. We don't know if Kaufman was painting in Hungary or Poland, but that was the area, to Yemen, Sana'a, the capital, the Gargoush, these beautiful Indian silk golden brocade attached with coins that was probably meant to be the dowry, and attached with these long gold chains with little tiny jewelry pieces, baskets that were made by Jewish silversmiths in Yemen. And so I thought it would be nice to pair it with Ofra Haza, the late wonderful Israeli Yemenite singer. She was on the cover of her album, Shirat Teman, Yemenite songs. You can hear her extraordinary voice in the playlist we've created for the gallery. So you have it on the website, you have it on the gallery. And why not? I had to include, because I was there that day, the wedding day of one of my oldest friends, Hila, in Israel. It shows that these traditions are still alive, they're still happening, and these headdresses are being given through generations by families of Yemenite women now in Israel. Here is the playlist. Make sure to listen to it. Okay, so far we've looked at ritual garments, and we've said that according to traditional Judaism, they're just reserved for men. The tzitzit, the fringes, the talit, the prayer shawl, and here comes Tamar Peli, this brilliant young Israeli jewelry designer who says, I'm going to make feminist renditions of these ritual garments for women so they can wear them if they're observant as ritual items. If they're secular, they can just wear them as beautiful jewelry because they want to. And so we've asked her to do also an audio clip, so you can listen to her in the app and in the gallery. And let's look at the sign upon your hand. You see? So it is a silver bracelet shaped with the shape of the letter Shin, for the initial of the word Shaddai, one of the words for God. She inscribes it with, she encloses it with a scroll inscribed with the verses from the Torah that are about the, really, our Lord, the Lord is our God, is one, probably the most important verse in the entire Torah, and you will bind them. You will bind these words as a sign upon your hand, which is what is traditionally done by men with the tzitzit. She's essentially doing a reinterpretation of the male tefillin. Yes. Okay. This is the last story. Why did I not show him when I was talking about the talit, right? That was a smooth transition. It would have been a smooth transition because, right, this painting made by a Russian immigrant in Boston in 1919, these portraits, the talmudists, we've installed it next to the talit, the prayer shawl, to inform how the prayer shawl is worn. However, I wanted to end with this because the story of the acquisition of this piece is very meaningful and I hope will be very inspiring to you here and at home. In 1926, a committee of members of the Boston Jewish community donated to the MFA this oil painting of an elderly Jew absorbed in the study of the Talmud. This work, the only gift by the Jewish community that I know of, was painted by Jacob Binder, a Russian Jewish portraitist and a student of John Singer Sargent. What was the reason for this gift? In a fascinating article, Professor Stephen Fine of Yeshiva University showed that the donation was in response to John Singer Sargent's offensive depiction of the Jewish faith in his mural painting cycle for Boston Public Library, that many of you, I'm sure, know. The third floor of the public library, there is this whole mural cycle called The Triumph of Religion. That represents Judaism as synagoga, you see on the left, that old medieval allegory from medieval illuminated manuscripts and statues on French cathedrals, where synagoga, Judaism, is depicted as a humiliated woman, in contrast to the majestic ecclesia, Christianity, that you don't see here. She's dethroned, she's half naked, she's attempting to cover herself, her crown is about to fall, she's holding a broken scepter, I think, and most importantly, she's blindfolded. Why is she blindfolded? Because she's blind to the truth of the Christian gospel. So John Singer Sargent in 1919 paints this, and there is an immediate uproar by people, by the Boston Jewish community, that are hurt and offended that this is what they have to see in their public library. There are even calls to have this picture removed. It doesn't happen, it's still there, which is good because it allows us to tell this story and to understand many things about many things. So a few years later, look on the right, Alexander Brin, the editor of the Jewish Advocate in Boston, launched a public campaign to purchase the Talmudist for the MFA, and he writes, to donate the painting to the great reservoir, which is the pride of the city of Boston, to the most typical presentation that, and I've put it on bold, a dignified and self-respecting artistic Jewry could make. Is that a coincidence that on the heel of the scandal and the offense of the synagogue, he chooses these words? He doesn't say fine, beautiful. He says self-respecting and dignified, which is the opposite of the humiliated synagogue. And so these words, and I wanted to conclude with them because they really speak to the wish of Boston Jews at the time to be accepted, to be represented, particularly by elite institutions like the MFA in Boston. Brin's appeal to the Boston Jewish community worked. Many people donated funds for this acquisition, which we can now finally show. And I can't help hoping that Brin's initiative and story actually can inspire some in the Boston Jewish community to support the MFA to build a strong Judaica collection. And so it gives me joy to be able to bring the Talmudist and Jewish art out of the shadows of storage and into the light of our inaugural Judaica gallery. Thank you.